Thank you for joining us and welcome to another edition of Answers Network. I'm your host, Alan Cardoza. And if this is your first time watching or listening to the show, know that every Monday from 11 a.m. to noon Pacific time, this show will bring on special guests that can inspire, educate, and in some cases entertain, while bringing answers and options to making our lives happier, healthier, and more successful. Now, I'd really appreciate it if you could all do me a big favor. Forward one of our shows to your social media group. Not right now, okay. But know that sharing my show and others like it that focus on improved health, happiness, education, and success is one powerful way we can make a positive influence in the world together. Now, I can say that about our guest as well, because Friedemann Schaub, MD and PhD, is a physician, researcher, personal development coach, and the author of the award-winning book, The Fear and Anxiety Solution. Now, having spent over 20 years teaching people how to rid themselves of anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem, Dr. Friedemann, as you will find many of his videos online are listed as, will explain how to master our subconscious and flip those self-sabotaging habits with his 6 keys to self-empowerment. Dr. Schaub, welcome to Answers Network.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. I have enjoyed not only reading your book, but also checking out some of the videos that you have on your webpage as well. But what I'd like to do is I want to start with a little bit more information about you and how and why you changed from being a physician and molecular biologist to helping people overcome anxiety and feeling powerless.
You know how the saying goes, you teach what you have to learn. And I certainly was struggling with anxiety for a long time. It started at the age of about 12 when I found out that I was not unconditionally loved. I was actually conditionally loved. So only if I had very good grades, behaved nicely, and did exactly what my parents wanted me to do, then finally I got a little bit of attention and positive feedback. And so that just kept on going into different roles that I had to play. For example, the peacemaker of a very tumultuous marriage between my parents. So I was constantly on the edge about how do I make them get along with each other? How do I please them so that they're not fighting? You can imagine for a child that's pretty stressful. But anxiety doesn't have an expiration date in this regard. You're not just saying, oh, now I'm 18, I'm going to get out of the house and now I can leave the anxiety in my children's room. No, that doesn't happen. So I took it with me, projected it nicely into all other endeavors in my life, whether it was being in medical school or being in cardiology or my relationships. It was always the belief I'm not enough. It was always the belief I have to do more, I have to reach higher goals. And that's exhausting. And at one point, I realized I'm not dealing with maybe an ambition, an overdrive, or just normal stress. I'm really dealing with anxiety. So to name it anxiety wasn't happening at 12. It happened actually in my late 20s, early 30s. And that's when my journey really began to find answers. I didn't want to take medication because as a doctor, I had plenty of self-medication experience and it didn't really work very well for me. So I wanted to find something else. And that's how I became really passionate about the subject, to help people to really find what I found is answers for why we have anxiety and how can we overcome it.
You know, you mentioned about you're feeling the anxiety, but not really having a name for it at an early age. I have 2 thoughts on that. One is, how old were you, and are you the oldest child?
No, I'm the youngest of 2. I have a sister. And, I just felt early on this, the typical symptoms. You feel restless. I had insomnia. Actually, I did have obsessive compulsive behavior, which was a way for me to deal with anxiety. So my favorite was when I felt really like, okay, my parents going to get a divorce or I going to end up somehow homeless, that I straightened carpets. And straightening carpets, my parents had a lot of carpets. Straightening carpets was for me the way to feel a little bit more in control, because I told myself, when they're all straight, nothing bad's going to happen. Now, that was a classic sign of being anxious. But even though my parents were doctors, they didn't necessarily see it or wanted to see it. And so I just lived in this not knowing, but really feeling bad for a long time.
And you mentioned that you felt like you needed to be a pleaser in hopes to try to bring them together. How old were you when you recognized that you were doing this?
Well, it's your job. So you don't really recognize you're doing it. You're just doing it. It's like
Right.
breathing. Now, I was actually born into this role of the peacemaker with my name Friedemann, which means man of peace. And my parents basically thought, well, the first child created a lot of trouble, so let's do the second child. Maybe that's going to fix the marriage. And so they literally gave me the name Peace Man as the designated peacemaker. As a girl, I would have been Frederica, which is not really sounding like free, peace or freedom, but they were glad that they couldn't directly write on my forehead. So yeah, I became basically that peacemaker early on, and I didn't even think anything about it. It was just clear that's my role, and so I was always the mediator between two fronts. And I have to say, kudos to me, they died still being married. So somehow maybe I have done something okay.
Well, yeah, they stayed together. It's did your did you feel like your sister took on some of the same things, or did she possibly become more of an avoider?
Well, my sister definitely was more an anxious avoider for sure, because I think she was so often teased in school and made fun of for, just being shy, that her go-to setting was more like, I don't want to deal with, any kind of discomfort. And when my parents were fighting, she was basically taking the side of my mother. And so that role, was basically hers. And I think also, just in general, she was more the one who, I think, kept her problems more as something that she shared with my family, whereas for me it was more the role of, no, you are the happy-go-lucky child. You're the one who has to have no problems, no issues. And so that was where, we just took on, different ways to exist in this little chaotic family.
Well, I know in the book you talk about avoider and pleaser quite a bit, and this sort of, I think, lets the audience understand, why maybe there's so much that you put into the book in regards to this. So one of the things I know you mentioned is, the six most common. So what are the six most common avoider and pleaser patterns that you've seen?
Well, the reason why I wrote this in the first place as kind of the sequel to the fear and anxiety solution is that I noticed that just overcoming fear and anxiety with all these conscious, subconscious methods that I have developed is not enough. And it's not enough because what we do when we're anxious is we're acting and showing up in that anxious mindset. And I call those patterns that we have just simply to survive, I call them survival patterns. And so the pleaser and the avoider pattern are both two modes that I would say 70 to 80% of my clients that have anxiety were falling into. And the six patterns, so there are three for avoider and there are three for the pleaser, are the victim. For the avoider, the invisibility. These are the people who don't want to really get any negative attention. And then there is a procrastinator, the person who just wants to avoid any kind of discomfort or failure. And the pleaser mode patterns are that helper, which basically is a good person that, just always gives and overgives without asking for anything, just a little bit of approval. Then there is the chameleon, the one that just blends beautifully into any kind of environment and setting you put them in, and pretty much forgets about looking for their own personality, because it's so much more important to belong and to fit in than, the fear of standing out and getting rejected. And then there is also the lover. And the lover is a classic codependent person who declares, this partner, this spouse is now the source of all my happiness and all my self-worth. And as we all know, that can often also, unfortunately, go totally off the rails, because we don't really love ourselves. We only have this conditional acceptance of ourselves and completely depend on the other person to give us a sense of, being of any value.
And when you have, let's say, that lover and that relationship breaks up, do you find that oftentimes that's transferred over to the children?
Yes, I mean, if there are children, yes, that can definitely
Mhm.
be then the designated, the son or the daughter who are then the source of all love, and you need to make me happy, and that can definitely happen. That this is one of those unfortunate mechanisms that may, for the children, make the parent look like a narcissist, because this is where narcissism often, I find, gets a little mixed in with all of those things, because a parent who didn't have really the sense of feeling worthy and didn't get it from their partner then wants it from the child, and then the child feels like, it was always about mom, it was always about dad, it was never about me. But that's just the void that the lover feels, that void inside of never having had enough love, enough attention. And that void, trying to fill it with a little bit of outside love is like trying to fill water in a bucket with a hole. It never really fully fills up. But the interesting thing about all those patterns, they sound extreme in
Mhm.
their ways, but we all have them. And that's
Yeah.
what I find so fascinating. We all have these experiences of this unrequited love, where we made one person the one that we really want and everything else didn't matter. And I mean, I went certainly through 2 or 3 of those relationships where I lost all my self-esteem because the person that I thought should love me back had simply no interest. And that pain that we go through and this distorted view of ourselves and that person, we know how that feels and we know where it comes from, because we don't really have that same attention and love for ourselves. And same with the invisibility pattern. You think, well, invisibility pattern is probably the person who is like a wallflower blending in with the paper and, doesn't want to be seen. But I have seen so many overachievers that are invisible because they don't show up as who they really are. They show up who they want to be seen as. So they don't show any vulnerability. They don't show any emotion. They don't show anything that really is inside deemed as weak. And so they only basically exhibit 20, 30% of themselves. That is a form of invisibility, because there is so much fear of being rejected, for not being that strong, altogether person. So when you really think about fear and anxiety and those patterns, it pretty much is something that concerns all of us. And we can learn so much from overcoming these patterns and living fuller and more rich lives.
Well, and I agree with you. What are some ways, because I think all of us have acquired some level of baggage in those areas as we go through life. What are some of the ways to get rid of it, to get back to our authentic self? And I
Mm.
know that from my standpoint, I look at things and I'm so thankful to have someone that gets me, and I don't have to think about a bunch of things about what I'm going to do or anything. I just sort of blurt out and become me. And it was such a relief. And I didn't realize that I was even doing that before, in a different relationship.
Mm.
And and it was like this huge weight was taken off, that wow, I can just be me. So what are some things that people can do to reach that same type of feeling?
I mean, I can totally relate to what you just said. I remember when I met my wife and I just knew her for a day. We just, met in a yoga camp. I said, man, I feel so at home with this person. Why do I feel it's like I know her since, I don't know, decades, but it was exactly that feeling of I could be myself. I
Yep.
didn't have to pretend. And that's a beautiful sign of, well, there is a person that you should really, focus on and hold on to. And also, this is how we always should feel. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not just limited to that one person, but the person shows you what's possible. Well,
Yeah.
when you ask how to get there, it's really the journey. It's a journey to ourself, which is what the empowerment solution is all about. But to get there sounds counterproductive. We have to stop asking ourselves, how can we do it? Because it's so cerebral. It's so conscious mind, rational. There must be a formula. There must be something A and B equals C. It's about the subconscious. And all of my work is about conscious subconscious collaboration. And what that basically means is that we have to learn to see the subconscious as a source of 90% of how we operate in our lives. 10% comes from this little tiny outdated computer called the conscious mind. And 90% is really what the subconscious is doing. It takes care of our emotions. Our beliefs are in the subconscious. All our memories are stored. Our body functions because of the subconscious. It's an enormous powerhouse. It's like a library, a supercomputer, an inner protector, a guide, all wrapped in together. And we don't really benefit from the subconscious if we are trying to ignore it. So, learning to listen to your subconscious and speak the language, that's kind of the fundamental first step. And it's very simple. I mean, listening can be during meditation. It can be just writing down your thoughts as they're popping up and you wonder where it comes from and what they mean. It can be listening to your dreams. It just can be more being aware of what drives you, what motivates you, what triggers you. It starts with self-awareness. And when
Mhm.
you do this, then you can also learn more about what are these old patterns and programs that I took on from my past, maybe because I thought I have to, like the pleaser or the peacemaker. And what are the things that I actually have been hiding for a long time because I was afraid that they would be judged. Like for me, it was really innocence. It was this magic in everything. I literally was able to see energy when I was little. I could see the energy of walls like, you see it in the Matrix. There was just
Mhm.
something really amazing about it. And I tried to explain it to my mom, and she put her hand on my forehead and said, "You have fever. It's clearly you have a fever." No, I didn't have a fever, but I just felt very connected to everything. And that got nicely beaten out of me. And so
Mm.
then I became much more black and white, and I lost that. And it wasn't until my anxiety made me realize you're off the wrong track. You're not living the life you're meant to be. You're not meant to either, look at a little petri dish or just focus on the physical symptoms of problems with the heart. You're here to do something else. And that's what I followed. And that's where I'm now. But I think we just have to really be willing to say that whatever is driving us, whether it's anxiety or whether it's these self destructive patterns, ultimately they are all ways for us to have more attention on the inside and learn to figure out more what else is possible, who else are we that we didn't know. And I needed to remember that, yeah, the magic of life and this feeling of just curiosity, that is something I needed to unearth. And thank God I got it back.
I love the fact that we are now getting into the subconscious mind. I too believe that it is very, very strong. And we have a question that's coming in from one of our listeners or viewers. And this one reads, I'm intrigued by what our subconscious mind can do. My wife is currently having problems with her sleep. She says once she wakes up in the middle of the night, her mind starts darting from subject to subject. What are some things that she can do to improve the situation? And this is from Randall in Houston, Texas.
Well, thanks, Randall. I think, many people who have that are basically feeling overwhelmed. So it's not that the subconscious, is trying to torture her when, it wakes her up in the middle of the night. It's simply saying, okay, you have so much to do. You have so much on your plate. 3 hours is enough for you to rest. Let's get going and get this all done. So what's really important is to understand what makes her feel so overwhelmed, or why is it that she puts so much on her plate? And how can she just also be more organized so that she has her days much more clearly structured, where the day-to-day life doesn't feel so much and so overwhelming? Because a lot of people who have this symptom, they have it all in their heads. They know, oh, I have 30 things to do. And maybe they have these little sticky pads all over the place, which really makes the mind already go crazy, because what if one gets blown away by the wind and then you don't know what to do? So the mind, in order to feel calm, needs a sense of everything is in control, everything is neatly tucked away, and tomorrow we know exactly what to do. It's absolutely manageable. It doesn't really exhaust us. If she gets to that place and she reminds herself at the end of the day what needs to be done tomorrow and that it's totally easy, then she doesn't get woken up at night. But the other thing is also, we often are so, and I'm certainly a poster child for this, conditional with our performance, that we are doing, and the doing is basically telling the subconscious, we have to achieve this in order to be okay. But we are never feeding the subconscious with what it's ultimately want, which is a sense of security and a sense of feeling okay or joy or happy. So at the end of the day, I always tell people, look at what you did today. Look how good it feels that so much got done. Feel appreciation, feel the joy of being on top of things or having so many things already accomplished, so that your subconscious also feels like, oh, I'm getting my, little Nutella bar here because I'm feeling better because I did the right thing. And I don't have to do more. I don't have to work harder or faster in order for the conscious mind to be pleased with me. It seems all is safe. Because in many ways, the subconscious has superpowers, but it needs the conscious mind to feel acknowledged. Otherwise, it just feels like, I'm going to just do what I need to do because no one guides me here. Almost like a child who needs a parent. And the conscious mind is more like the parent who directs the child, tells the child where the limits are, and also helps the child to feel valued.
And it sounds like you're touching on a little bit about those times in which we feel disconnected. And I know that in your book, you talk a lot about being disconnected. And it got me thinking about, there are so many people now, and I'm very blessed that I get to travel the world. So I meet people from a variety of different cultures. But I am hearing a lot about people feeling they're disconnected. They're disconnected from society, or they're disconnected from their family. But what does it mean when we're disconnected from ourselves?
Well, I think when, I was a disconnected specimen, because when I was especially in medicine, I went to parties. I mean, I was almost tempted to have my white coat and the stethoscope on, because I had no identity, no personality whatsoever. I totally identified myself with my work. And so when people ask me, who are you? Oh, I'm Friedemann. I'm a doctor. That was like, boom, came all in one thing, because I didn't really have anything else that I felt I was either passionate about or I knew myself. And so there was a deep-seated insecurity that was, covered up by this sense of false identity of my job. which is ultimately a sign of feeling disconnected. And I knew I was disconnected when I felt constantly the need to find answers for questions I didn't even know were there. I just felt like I need to find something, a sense of peace or a sense of feeling okay or a sense of confidence. So I went to, doing different things that I thought going to fill me up, adventurous things, hang gliding, whatever. I thought that's going to be my new identity. Nothing really fulfilled me until I realized at some point that maybe there is something inside of me that I need to look for, something like, that makes me me. And that's a journey that I really, ultimately got me into meditation and got me into yoga and got me into introspection. And what I noticed immediately after the first yoga class, which was connected to a meditation afterwards, I didn't want to get off the floor. I felt so relaxed. I couldn't really understand it. I thought, man, what is that feeling? This is like, whew, I didn't take any pills. I didn't drink. I feel so great. It lasted only for 5 minutes, but it was awesome. It was amazing. And that made me feel like, well, that's maybe what I was looking for. This sense of just being okay.
Well, for everybody out there, the book is The Fear and Anxiety Solution. And the website is drfriedemann.com. And if you're driving and you're having trouble spelling that, I'll make sure that we put that on on our show notes afterwards, where you can get at answers.network. We're going to take a break. We will be right back. And when we get back, I'd like to talk a little bit about survival mode. You talk quite about it in the book, and I'd like to really delve a little deeper into that. So for everybody out there, we'll be right back. You're listening to or watching Answers Network.
Conflict International are experts at uncovering the truth. Our specialist team has decades of experience in providing a range of bespoke investigation and intelligence services to companies and individuals. Whether you need professional screening or background checks of employees, due diligence of potential clients or business partners, asset tracing services, or surveillance, Conflict International has a rapid response team on hand to get you to the heart of the matter. Our key strength is in our global capabilities. We can tap into an extensive network of trusted professional investigators based in most jurisdictions worldwide, enabling us to go almost anywhere a case takes us. Conflict International has decades of experience with a diverse range of skills among our team, developed from backgrounds in military and security intelligence services, as well as practiced lawyers. Visit our website today at conflictinternational.com to find out more about our services. That's conflictinternational.com. Global reach, local knowledge.
And we're back. We are talking with Dr. Friedemann, and we are talking about anxiety and some of the solutions. Now, when we went to break, I said we're going to talk a little bit about survival mode, because I feel like over the last few years, a higher percentage of people than at least I've seen in my lifetime appear to have gone into survival mode. So my question is, have you seen this as well? And if so, I mean, how does living in survival mode affect us? And how do we switch out of it?
I mean, there are two kinds of survival modes. So there is a one that is really like, I don't know, bare knuckles survival mode about just having food on the table, somehow making it to pay the bills. And that's not the survival mode I'm talking about, but that certainly is also a survival mode that just has been, certainly since the pandemic, getting worse and worse with inflation and so on. And that is a survival mode that leads often then to a lot of anxiety, because you do feel like the uncertainty and that not knowing what's next and, catastrophizing. Your mind can go crazy, and your mind can certainly make up all the stories and show you all the pictures of what potentially could happen and probably will never happen, so that you do have to take care of yourself. Just being in this state of surviving with your needs doesn't mean that your needs as a human being don't matter. So I always tell people, even if you don't have a lot of money, make sure, because certain things are free, like walking in nature is free, doing some meditation, watching some YouTube videos. I have so much stuff on my YouTube channel that is free, that gives you information about anxiety and how to overcome it. So don't just ignore your mental health. But the survival mode I'm talking about is a survival mode that is coming from this growing disconnection from ourselves. And that has to do with how we are living our lives. So much has changed since we have screens all over the place, since we have these connections to everyone literally in the world, since we are distracted beyond our mind's capacity to cope. A lot has changed. Our mind is so focused on everything outside that what's happening on the inside doesn't really matter anymore. And what also doesn't matter anymore is the sense of fulfillment or authenticity or feeling that we are on purpose, because these questions, who am I? What do I want? What's important to me? What do I have to offer? We don't ask these questions anymore. What we ask now is, who do we need to be in order to get a lot of likes? Or what is the newest trend? Or what is it what I shouldn't do? Or how should I change? Because there are obviously trendsetters and influencers that tell me this is not acceptable. So we are constantly in this construct of an external matrix that we somehow try to adjust to, that we are really losing touch with ourselves. So the fear of rejection, the fear of not fitting in, the fear of not having any value, that is the new anxiety driving fear that so many people are really dealing with. And that is where I think it just goes round and round. So you go in one of those survival patterns, like I said before, the avoider or pleaser pattern, which is a survival mode. You do that for a while, and then you realize no matter how many people are avoided, no matter how many people I was pleasing or were getting likes from, it never really feels that I'm feeling more at ease, that I'm feeling more relaxed. I mean, case in point are the people that are, incredibly famous and popular. They are often ridden with anxiety because they're so afraid of, what if this all goes away? What if I get negative press? What if someone doesn't like this or that about me? And so their dependency on this external validation is literally driving them into panic attacks and often self-destructive behavior. And so we know we cannot look for peace or confidence from the outside. We have to find it on the inside.
And let's talk about how anxiety affects the physical body. It's one of the things, and I get asked from time to time, what do you do health-wise? What supplements do you take, or things like that, and I'll talk about things, and then maybe they'll see me, eating a hot fudge sundae, and they'll go, "Oh my God, how can you eat that hot fudge sundae?" And I said, well, the reason I can do this, and in my mind, I kind of call it the 80-20 rule, is if I eat the right things about 80% of the time, the other 20% of the time, I'm going to kind of eat whatever I want. Right. And I'm not going to stress over the fact that I did this. And my thoughts have been, the stress itself will be worse for me if I was at 100%, meaning I can never eat anything bad. The stress, those times in which I do cheat, the stress is worse for me than if I just would have eaten it. Am I right on this?
I completely agree. Absolutely. And I do feel like that. No, I think that stress is way worse than most of our foods. The thing that I think is important is that we don't become unconscious. Because the problem eating is not the conscious choice of having a fudge sundae. Because you say, oh, this looks good. I really want this today. I deserve it today. Why not? That's a conscious choice. The unconscious eating, where you should eat better, but somehow you find yourself in the drive-through of your favorite fast food joint over and over again. And you're somehow always saying yes to the question if you should get supersized or not. That is where we get unconscious. And that is, I think, much unhealthier than if you make a conscious choice to splurge once in a while or indulge once in a while. But you ask about the physical impact of anxiety.
Yes.
Anxiety does not kill you. A lot of people feel like, oh my God, I have a panic attack, I'm going to die. And so they go to the hospital with all these symptoms of a heart attack, but they don't have a heart attack. It's simply the anxiety mimicking a heart attack or mimicking these extreme symptoms, which has a reason. I believe anxiety is here to wake us up, to warn us, to make us pay attention. If anxiety would be like a little itch, we would just scratch it and we wouldn't be really protected. So we have to have intense emotions, an intense feeling when we are anxious, because ultimately it is about being safe. But what does when you have stress, so it's not the anxiety moment that really does you harm, but what does you harm is when you are afraid of your own anxiety. See, when you are, and that's where the stress comes in. This is called secondary anxiety, where we're constantly worrying, constantly looking over our shoulder. Where is the anxiety? Does it come back? How do I keep it in check? You don't even have anxiety per se. It's not really coming from your subconscious, but you're creating it because you don't trust yourself anymore. You don't think that you're okay. You're telling yourself there is something wrong with you. That is a stress that we have to get under control. And it basically means we have to learn to understand our emotions again and learn to trust our emotions, because we cannot run away from ourselves. We cannot run away from our feelings. So we either face them and try to embrace them, or they're going to always somehow poke us the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things I always love to do with this show is I want everybody out there to feel like they came away with some techniques, some exercises that they can do. So what are some practical techniques or exercises that you recommend for readers or listeners to effectively tap in and harness the power of their subconscious mind and do it on a daily basis? So can you provide some kind of specific examples or practices that they can start implementing immediately and see a change?
Well, the best way to start is really understanding that a lot of your thoughts, coming back to anxiety, a lot of your thoughts, a lot of your negative thoughts are coming from the subconscious. Good example is you're on your second date and all of a sudden there is this thought coming up. What if she's bored with you already? Did you see? She was looking at her phone twice and she wasn't really laughing about your joke. And all of a sudden, all this negativity come up and you think, shut up, shut up, shut up. But obviously your subconscious doesn't listen to shut up. It just keeps on going. And so when you have those negative thoughts coming up and you realize it's your subconscious talking, what do? How do you get your subconscious to change its mind? And here's a very simple exercise to do this. The first thing is 3 times a day, you're going to write down the negative thoughts that are coming up. Not during your second date, but when they come up during whatever, you're just jogging around and you have a negative thought. And it doesn't have to be all about self-judgment. It can be also about the what ifs in life. You just write it down. And then for, let's say, a week, 3 a day, you have a good overview of what's going on up here. And you realize, whoa, it's the same pattern, the same theme over and over again. And it's a theme that may be about not feeling safe or not feeling good enough, or maybe feeling that people don't really like you. You get an idea of that subconscious limiting core belief. That's a key word, limiting core belief that drives a lot of how you see the world and how you see yourself. And then you make up your mind and say, okay, so let's imagine this would be my little brother, little sister, my son, my daughter, who would have those thoughts and would think that they are not good enough or not safe. How would I respond to them when they say something negative like I have been writing down? And so for each of the thoughts that you've been writing down, you're now coming up with an answer. For example, let's say this, the thought that comes always up, oh, I'm going to get fired and I will never find another job and I'm going to end up under a bridge. So this is kind of the theme of not being good enough, not being safe.
Right.
And then you would answer, even though a child wouldn't do the labor, be child labor, it's not allowed. No, but you're imagining this is again the feeling of not good enough. So you're saying like, I have a lot to offer. I'm always being, really on top of everything. I'm giving my best. And if this is not good enough for this employer, there will be plenty of people that are going to be happy to have me. I'm just going to trust that I continue to do my best and I will get the results I want. I mean, whatever those things are that sound good, this is a good starting point. But your subconscious doesn't get it yet because sounding good, not enough for the subconscious. So now you have to really feel an emotion with it. And the emotion that works best is the emotion of compassion. So you're literally imagining a child telling you, what if I gonna fail in class, or what if I not make it through the year? And then you would say the same thing. You always do the things on time. You can always improve, but you're always willing to do this, blah, 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 blah. But you do it as if you're talking to a child, imagining that your anxiety inside of you is exactly at the same level of, let's say, a 10-year-old. Like my anxiety is 10 years old. And so my anxiety needs to hear these reassuring, guiding messages from me. Not so much anymore, but the beauty about this is when you start with this, 1 week you do this, then you're writing down the answers that you would give a child. Then you do another week of simply, as soon as a thought come up, you are re-guiding it. You will have a 70 to 80% decrease in your negative thoughts, guaranteed. But again, it has to come from the heart. You cannot just do it in your head like an inner debating club. It has to come from the heart, but it really reaches with the emotion, the subconscious mind. And that's really what it's all about.
I love that. I love that. And again, for anybody out there, there's also other shorter clips on Dr. Friedemann's website as well, and we'll give you that as well before we go. We've only got about 7 more minutes. We've got another question that has come in. This one reads, I've been married to the same man for 35 years. Unfortunately, after our 3rd child was born, my husband stopped having any form of intimacy with me. We tried counseling multiple times to no avail, as he refused to continue to go when the counselor suggested that he take any responsibility for our struggles. The kids are now grown and have their own lives, and seeing how lonely I was encouraged me to leave and date others. A little over a year ago, I left him because I've met a man, a wonderful man, and so now with my husband, and it's in quotes, playing the victim, our adult children have threatened to cut me out of my grandchildren's lives if I divorce their father. I stayed in the marriage for the benefit of the children. Now I feel they want to enslave me to him and deprive me of true relationship love. I don't want to lose my relationship with my adult children and my grandchildren. I also don't want to lose the man I have fallen in love with. Why do you think they are doing this? And what can I do to find the happiness I so desire? And this is from Catherine in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Wow, Catherine, thank you so much for sharing. And I have to say, stick with what makes you happy. Sometimes it is at the beginning really a journey for people to get it, that we are no longer just the person who is sacrificing everything for the benefit of others. It's almost like they look at us differently and say, oh, who are you? I don't like you. I liked you much better as a doormat. And now you're saying, no, I don't want to do this anymore. Life is short. I have been slaving along for 35 years. I didn't get really a lot of what I wanted. My desires were unimportant. And so I'm going to go for this. Now, your children need to have a talking to. One of my best friends, he had the same situation, a wife that mistreated him and really, really did horrible things to him. Finally, he left her. He found a beautiful other person, and now his children are not talking to him as well. Now, he doesn't look back because he knows. I mean, if he had to choose to have a relationship with his children or this person who is turning out to be really the love of his life, he would always choose this love of his life because he made the right decision. But he did never sit down with the children and speak directly to what's going on. He avoided this conversation. So you cannot avoid the conversation with your children. You have to call them into understanding that they have been manipulated by the victimization role of their father. And I'm pretty sure that the father still is unwilling to take any responsibility, just like he did probably during this time in therapy. And the children have probably no idea about it. And you may feel like, oh no, I don't want to backstab him. But you're not backstabbing him. You're just setting the record straight. Don't be like one of those people who feels like, well, I have to be on the high road. But then she is treated as she is the perpetrator, as if it was all her fault. Tell the children what was really going on, how much you really have been suffering, and why there's a good reason for you to leave, and that they probably would do exactly the same if they would have been in their shoes. And then they finally going to wake up to actually who is the victim and who is just playing it.
Well, I thank you for that. And again, we've got about 3 minutes, and I have another question now that has come in. This one says, I feel like I've had anxiety all of my life. I was an anxious child, and now I'm an anxious adult. I have read that it is genetic. Is this true? And if so, how do I prevent from passing it down to my children? This is from Rachel in San Francisco, California.
Well, the whole genetic game is kind of, difficult to really swallow, because if you really tell yourself it's genetic, you pretty much tell yourself, well, I'm a victim of my biology. And that's really not the case. And in most, it's a very, very small percentage where you could really say for sure this is genetically passed down. We are talking about maybe 20%. Most of the times, it's something that is epigenetic. And epigenetic means that the environment, what we take in from the outside, how people were talking and how they treated us, and whatever happened early, even when we were still in the womb, in our mother's womb, that has an influence on which genes in our body get activated or methylated. And so what happens then is that certain genes, because of the environment, make us more susceptible to anxiety than people who never had these epigenetic conditions, like let's say chaos or disorder or fights and conflict. Now, the good news is that this is a reversible process. You're not stuck with it. You're not like in a place where you say, okay, no, my genes are damaged, so there's nothing I can do about it. No, it has been shown in studies that you can, through working on yourself and learning to heal your emotional challenges, that these genes are also reversing themselves to another state where your anxiety predisposition goes down. So you're not a victim of your genes. I'm pretty sure about that. But just don't give up working on yourself, because that is really the key to it. Emotions don't necessarily go away by themselves. And if you have been anxious as a child, you may resonate very much with what we just talked about, counterbalancing negative self-talk, thinking about this child that may be anxious inside of you.
Dr. Friedemann, I got to tell you, first of all, thank you for coming on the show. But more importantly, thank you for making a positive difference in the world. I love what you're doing. And again, for everybody out there, the website, drfriedemann.com. The book is The Fear and Anxiety Solution. And if there was ever a time, at least in my lifetime, to where a book like this could make a difference, this is the time in our society. So I highly recommend it. And if you're sitting there thinking, I kind of got it together, I'm betting somebody that could use it as well. So again, Friedemann, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And by the way, the other book is The Empowerment Solution. That's exactly for the people who think they have it together and want to upgrade their life to another level.
Yes. In fact, yes. In fact, I was hoping to have gotten more time to be able to read that, but that is one that I'm also now just getting started on. So again, everybody check it out. I believe both are mentioned on the website. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Perfect.
Definitely.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was such a fun talk.
I'm glad. And for everybody out there, please visit our archives of past interviews at answers.network, or just subscribe to the show through Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, Rumble, Spreaker, and so many other popular podcast platforms. And if you like what you hear, please leave a review. I want you to know that it will help us reach more people. And if we reach more people, we make more of a positive difference. And that's what you're doing. So please share it with other people. There's plenty of negativity out there in the mainstream media, shows like this, and there's plenty of others like it. In fact, again, just like Dr. Friedemann, he's got a show that is all very positive. This is what you need. These are the things that are going to help you. It's going to help your subconscious. It's going to help your family, and it's going to help your life. And also remember, the next time you're on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, Twitter is now X, stop by our page, check out some of our latest posts. If you like them, please like us and spread the word. So for everybody out there, once again, be good human beings and be with us again next week on Answers Network.